Hello all. We have all heard about the term calories. Now what is calories? It's very common. We say that I'm eating too many calories, I have to burn a lot of calories, etc. So what is calories? Calories is nothing but a unit of energy. Now what is energy? Today we're going to discuss about the components and requirements. So energy is the capacity to do work and calorie is a unit of energy. 1 calorie or 1 kilocalorie is equal to the amount of energy required to raise the temperature of 1 kg of water by 1 degree Celsius. So basically energy here is defined by thermal energy or heat energy. Now in our body we are mostly dealing with chemical energy, that is energy from food that we eat and also kinetic energy, that is energy that we use to perform our task. Now here in our body we are dealing with the energy intake and energy expenditure. So we have energy intake and expenditure. Now intake. Intake deals with everything, how we take in energy. Now we know that, we have learned from very small classes that food gives you energy. So basically that's how it is. Food gives us the energy. So this energy intake comprises of all the food that you eat. Food in the form of carbohydrates, proteins, fats, all of them give you energy. And the expenditure part. Now expenditure, you get energy from the food that you eat and now you use that energy for all the things that happens in your body, and also we know about the voluntary and involuntary activities in the body. Now the components of expenditure, we can say physical activity. Now physical activity accounts for about 30% of the expenditure. Now 30% of energy we use is for physical activity, that is walking around, doing all the tasks, your occupational activities, thinking, everything comes under physical activity. Now another 10% is for what we call the thermic effect of food. Now this might be a new term. Now thermic effect of food. Thermic effect of food refers to the energy that is needed to digest, absorb, transport the food that we eat. So when we have the intake, now some amount of energy is also required to actually burn the food that you have eaten. So that accounts for thermic effect of food. Not all foods have the same thermic effect. Some foods need more energy to break down and certain foods require less energy. So that comes about 30% and 10%. Now what about the rest? So here we have accounted for the 40% of energy expenditure. Now what about the 60%, which is the bulk of it? So 60% of our energy is not for physical activity or for digesting our food. Then what is it for? Now the 60% of our expenditure comes from something called as BMR, the basal metabolic rate. Now this term, we have heard of so many people who tend to eat a lot of food, but they tend to be very, very thin. And there are certain other people who actually eat nothing at all. They may be eating air and they'll be really, really fat, and they might be thinking, what is the reason? I mean, I'm not eating anything, still I'm not losing weight. Now this is the main reason, the BMR is the main reason for all this. That is, the metabolism inside our body is different for different people. So what is metabolism? Metabolism is all the activities, the chemical reactions that take place in our body. The anabolism and the catabolism. Anabolism is the making of compounds, that is bringing together different compounds to form something, and catabolism is the breakdown. So a lot of reactions are taking place in our body without our knowledge. So BMR is basically all those reactions that take place inside our body without our knowledge. All the involuntary reactions, the way we breathe, our brain is working, the kidneys are working, and lot of all the other organ systems are working without our knowledge. And so basal metabolic rate is basically all the things that we don't know about. So 60% of the energy that we spend is for things that we don't know about, or those things which happen without our knowledge. Now BMR is basically for different people. Factors affecting BMR. So now, what are the factors that BMR is dependent upon? The first one is body composition. Now, we have discussed about certain people having different types of body and different metabolic rates. Now, what is body composition? So, BMR is dependent on body composition. So, different people have different body composition. We know about athletes having really muscular body, and the muscular body, which we can say as something called as fat-free mass, FFM. So, fat-free mass is high in certain people and low in certain people. So, we have two types of body tissues, fat mass and fat-free mass. So, people who have more fat-free mass tend to be having more or higher BMR compared to those people who have more fat mass. So, we see that athletes and all the people who are metabolically really active are people who have more fat-free mass. So, body composition, that is, people who have more fat-free mass have more metabolically active tissue. 2. Gender. Now, we've seen that women tend to have lower BMR compared to men. Now, this is also a reason, this can also be attributed to the body composition of women. That is, women tend to have more of adipose or fat tissues in their body compared to men. So, definitely women have lower BMR compared to men. Now, the third factor is age. Now, when is your body the most active? It is when in your first 2 years of life. That is, for a very small baby, you can see that in 1 year, there are a lot of changes happening in the body. There is a lot of growth, lot of things are going on in the first 2 years of your life. That is, so in the first 2 years of life, the BMR is at its height and it slowly decreases. And then again that hits a rise, that is during the adolescent age or the puberty age. And during puberty also, there is a spike in the BMR. There are a lot of changes in your body, there are secondary sexual changes and all these things that account for a higher metabolism. And then moving on to adulthood, again there is a decline in the BMR. Now, as person ages, for every 10 years after adulthood, there is a decrease in BMR. Number 4 is the different hormones. Now, the hormones in your body influence the metabolism, especially certain hormones like thyroid hormones. Now, we all have heard about thyroid problems being very common nowadays. That is, when you have certain weight loss or weight reduction, weight gain, which is without any reason, the doctor asks you to check your hormone levels or mostly your thyroid levels. So, because of the fact that thyroid hormones can influence your metabolism, that is, the T3 and T4 hormones secreted by the thyroid gland increases your metabolism. So, in the condition called as hypothyroidism, there is a decrease in the thyroid hormones, and so the metabolic rate decreases. And when comes, there is another, the flip side, there is increase in the thyroid hormones, that is hyperthyroidism can lead to an increased metabolism. Next factor is the environmental conditions. Environmental conditions, mainly the temperature, the climate, etc., can influence the metabolic rate. Now, certain people who live in very cold countries tend to have higher metabolic rate compared to people of tropical countries. This is because of the fact that our body temperature is set at 37 degrees Celsius, and our body wants to feel a little closer to that temperature. And so, in cold conditions, what happens is the body has to spend more energy to keep warm, and so the metabolism increases in such conditions. The next factor is the physiological state. Physiological state refers to the state in which your body is present. For example, if the person is pregnant, breastfeeding or lactating, etc. Now, pregnancy, lactation, etc. calls for a higher BMR, or a basal metabolic rate increases during pregnancy, because there is a greater blood volume and also a lot of changes occur in the body of a pregnant mother. The increased blood volume and the growth of the fetus and so on. So, to account for all these, the energy requirements are higher, and so the metabolic rate increases. So is the case with lactating mother, or a breastfeeding woman needs more energy because she spends too much energy on for producing milk for the young one. Now, the next factor is state of nutrition. Now, this is common for all. State of nutrition is how nourished you are. Now, undernourished people will have a low BMR compared to a person who have an adequate nourishment. So, people who are starved or who undergo starvation will have lower BMR, because naturally there is not much energy for their chemical reactions to take place in the body. So, these are the major factors which affect BMR. Now, moving on to energy balance. So, we have discussed about basal metabolic rate, physical activity and thermic effect of food as being the components of energy expenditure. Moving on to energy balance. Now, balance, so you see the energy intake, that is the food that you take in, when it is equal to the energy expenditure, you can say that it is in a balance. That is, as we said, the calories in is equal to the calories out. This calories that you take in is burnt by the expenditure. Now, there is something called as positive balance. Positive balance is when the energy intake is higher than the energy expenditure. That is mostly that you eat a lot and you have not burnt all that, or you have not spent it. And there is something called as a negative energy balance. The negative energy balance is when the intake is less and the expenditure is high. So, both these conditions can be harmful, because the first one can lead to a condition called as overweight and subsequently obesity, etc. And the negative balance, when prolonged, can lead to undernutrition, underweight, etc. So, this is about energy balance. So, we need to have a good energy balance. That is, the intake should be balanced with the expenditure. That is, the food that you take in should be balanced with how you spend it in terms of basal metabolic rate, the thermic effect of food and physical activity. Now, we have very little to do with BMR and the thermic effect of food. What is in our control is the physical activity. So, we can focus on, if your intake is higher, you can balance it with the physical activity, or as you say, the physical activity is also the same as exercise. So that is how we can balance the energy intake and the expenditure. To ensure a good energy balance, one must be careful about the energy intake and also the physical activity part of the energy expenditure. That is, as much as you take in, you have to make sure that you spend it on your physical activity, which thereby also increases your BMR, thereby having a healthy you. Thank you.